Mary picked up the child and said to Samuel, "Who could have left a child in this forest?" Samuel, the husband, was also so shocked that someone could drop a baby alone inside the forest. This is a story about a helpless baby abandoned in the heart of a forest. When Mary picked up the child, she turned to Samuel, her husband, and asked, "Who could have left a child in this forest?" They took her in, named her Grace, and raised her with love. But years later, the woman who abandoned her returns, demanding her back. What would you have done if you are the who found her and raised her? Would you give her up just because a strange woman appeared saying she is the biological mother of the child? Or would you rather fight for the custody of the child? The wind howled through the dark forest. The trees swayed, whispering secrets. Deep in the woods laid a cute baby on the cold ground, wrapped in a thin cloth. Her cries echoed so loud to attract help, but no one came. Dr. Samuel and his wife, Mary, were driving home when they heard the soft wailing of a child in the distant forest. Mary gasped. "Samuel, stop the car. I hear something." Samuel stopped. They stepped out, following the sound into the forest. They reached a big oak tree beneath it. They found a beautiful baby girl, helpless and cold. Mary lifted the baby gently. "Who would leave a baby here?" she whispered, tears in her eyes. Samuel held his wife close. "We will take her home, Mary. She is safe now." As they drove home, Mary looked down at the baby, who had stopped crying. Thoughts of who would have abandoned such a beautiful baby inside the forest. Then suddenly she said Grace. That will be her name. What led to her naming the child Grace is what she couldn't explain, but she believes the name is perfect for a child who is abandoned and saved. Samuel nodded. Grace it is. They didn't know that this one act of kindness would change their lives forever. That night, as Mary rocked the baby to sleep, she whispered, "We will love you forever, my sweet Grace." But outside, in the shadows of the forest, someone watched. A woman, hidden among the trees, her eyes filled with regret. She had left the child, but she had not left her heart behind. Grace grew up surrounded by love. Samuel and Mary showed her good parental care and love. They mostly gave her warm hugs, tuck her into soft blankets during bedtime, and also bedtime stories to make her fall asleep. She laughed, played, and danced around the house. But something was different about Grace. She was born blind and couldn't see. Maybe that's why she was abandoned at the forest. Sometimes Grace would ask Mary, "Will I ever see the stars, Mama?" Touching Mary's face. Mary kissed her forehead. "You see with your heart, my love. One day, you will understand." Samuel tried everything to help Grace. He spoke to doctors, read books, and prayed. "She deserves to see the world," he whispered to himself. Then one day, a miracle happened. A new doctor of optometry came to town, offering a special surgery. Samuel scheduled an appointment with him to explain the condition of Grace to him. After the consultation, the doctor told Samuel, "There is hope. It was a risk, but we have to try." With trembling hands, Mary signed the papers. The day of the surgery arrived. Grace lay on the hospital bed, holding her father's hand. "Will it hurt?" she asked. "Just for a moment, my love," Samuel whispered. Hours passed. Mary paced outside the operating room. "Please let her be okay," she whispered. Then the doors of the theater opened, and the doctor stepped out. "The surgery went well," he said. Relief flooded Mary and Samuel. 2 weeks later, after the surgery, it was time to remove the bandages. After the bandages was removed, Grace blinked. Light flooded her world. For the first time, she saw her parents' faces. "Mama, Daddy, I see you," she cried. Tears streamed down Mary's face. "Yes, my love, you can see." But across town, in a tiny, Dark house. A woman gasped as she overheard villagers speaking. "The girl they call Grace can see now," one of them said. The woman clutched her chest. "Grace? My Grace." Her heart pounded. She had to see for herself. The past was about to return. The next morning, Grace ran outside, laughing as she chased butterflies. Everything was new and beautiful to her. The green leaves, the blue sky, the bright flowers. She had never seen such wonders before. But as she played, she felt something. Someone was watching her. A woman stood at the edge of the yard, half hidden behind a tree. Her eyes were locked on Grace, with her pale face. Grace frowned. "Mama? Who is that?" Mary turned and froze. The woman quickly stepped back, disappearing into the trees. "No one, sweetheart," Mary said, forcing a smile. But her hands trembled as she pulled Grace close. "Come inside now." That night, Mary told Samuel what happened. His face darkened. It must be her, the woman who left Grace. Mary swallowed hard. What if she wants her back? Samuel took a deep breath. She abandoned Grace. "We raised her. We won't let her take our daughter away." But the next day, the woman returned. This time, she did not hide. She knocked on the door. Mary opened it slowly. The woman stood there, her eyes filled with tears. "Please," she whispered, "I just want to see her." Samuel stepped forward. "Who are you, and what do you want with my daughter? Leave now, or I call the police." The woman responded saying, "She is my daughter," and Samuel angrily responded with anger, "You left her to die. What else do you want from her?" The woman trembled. "I made a mistake. I was young. I was scared, but I have never stopped thinking about her." Grace peeked from behind Mary. "Who is she, Mama?" Tears fell down the woman's cheeks. I am your mother." Silence filled the room. Grace's heart pounded. She had a mother? But wasn't Mary her mother? "Doctor." Samuel clenched his fists. "You need to leave." The woman's lips quivered. "Please, just let me talk to her." Mary's voice was firm. "You don't get to walk in and claim you want to talk to her. You gave her up. So, what on earth do you want to say to her?" The woman stepped back, pain in her eyes. "I will come back," she whispered. "I won't give up." As she disappeared into the night, Samuel and Mary held Grace close. The battle for their daughter had begun. Days passed, and the tension in the house grew. Grace was confused. She loved Mary and Dr. Samuel, but something inside her longed to understand the truth. Who was the woman? Why had she left her? One evening, Mary sat by the window, lost in thought. A deep sadness filled her heart. For years, she had loved Grace as her own, but now fear gripped her. What if Grace wanted to leave? What if she chose her birth mother instead? "Doctor." Samuel noticed Mary's sadness. He took her hand and whispered, "We are her parents. Love will guide her heart." That night, something unexpected happened. Mary felt strange. A warmth spread through her body, and a soft glow filled her heart. It was a feeling she had never known before. The next morning, she felt dizzy. "Samuel, I am not feeling well. Something is different," she whispered. "I am feeling so weak and sick at the same time." Samuel thought maybe the feeling was because of the encounter they had with the strange woman yesterday. But as Mary's health got worse, he called their family doctor to explain the situation and was asked to come to the hospital with his wife. After a few tests was ran on Mary, the doctor smiled. "Mary, you are with child." Tears filled Mary's eyes. "A baby? But I thought I could never have one." "It is a miracle," Samuel whispered, holding her close. "A blessing for the love we have given." Mary was said to be barren, that she couldn't bore a child, but miraculously she is not pregnant with a baby. Could this be because of the love they showered on the child they saved from the forest? When little Grace heard the news, she jumped with joy. "I will have a brother or sister?" she asked, her eyes wide with excitement. Mary hugged her tightly. "Yes, my love, you will." Little did they know, this miracle would change everything. For just as Mary's heart filled with joy, the woman in the shadows made a new plan. She would not leave without her child. She would fight for Grace. The news of Mary's pregnancy spread quickly through the village like wildfire. Women gathered around her. Friends and neighbors came to congratulate her, smiling and touching her belly. "It is a blessing," they said. "After so many years, you are finally with a child." Mary felt joy, but deep inside, a new fear crept in. Would Grace feel left out? Would she think they loved the new baby more than her? One evening, as Mary sat by the fire, rubbing her belly, she whispered, "I should be happy, but my heart is heavy. Samuel." "Doctor." Samuel sighed. "We must prepare, Mary. She won't give up easily." The next day, Grace was playing outside when she saw the woman again. This time, the woman did not hide. She walked straight to Grace and knelt down, her hands trembling. "My child," she whispered, "do you know who I am?" Grace stared at her. "You say you are my mother, but Mama and Papa love me. They take care of me." Tears filled the woman's eyes. "I loved you too, but I was young and scared. I made a mistake." Mary rushed outside. "Grace, come inside now." Her voice was sharp, filled with fear. The woman stood up. "Please, I don't want to take her away. I just want a chance to know her." Mary's hands clenched into fists. "You left her to die. You have no right." Just then, Samuel stepped forward. "Enough. We need to talk inside. This cannot continue like this." Inside, the tension was thick. The woman, whose name was Naomi, told her story. She had been poor, abandoned by the father of the child, and afraid. Leaving Grace had been the hardest thing she had ever done. "I never forgot her," Naomi whispered. "And now that I know she is alive, I cannot walk away." Mary's heart ached. She wanted to hate this woman, but she saw the pain in her eyes. Grace, sitting between them, looked up. "Can't we all love each other?" Silence filled the room after she asked such question. How could a child of 6 years say such a heartwarming thing? The battle for Grace was only beginning. Back in the village, everywhere was buzzing with news of Mary's pregnancy. People called it a miracle, a gift from the heavens. But in the shadows, Naomi, Grace's birth mother, watched with a heavy heart. "If they have their own child now," she whispered to herself, "they won't need Grace anymore." Naomi had spent years regretting leaving her daughter. When she first saw Grace again, hope had filled her. But Mary and Samuel had closed the door on her. Now, with a new baby on the way, would they push Grace aside? All this and many more are things running through her head. One evening, Naomi approached the village chief, an old man with wise eyes. "Please," she pleaded, "I want to claim my daughter." The chief sighed. "Naomi, you abandoned the child which Samuel and Mary have raised her with love." "But she is mine," Naomi cried. "Shouldn't she know the truth? Shouldn't she have the choice?" The chief nodded. "Then let us ask Grace." Naomi's heart pounded. Would Grace choose her? The next day, the village elders gathered and also invited Mary and Samuel. They both arrived with Grace, who clung to her mother's hand. Naomi stood alone, her hands trembling. The chief spoke. "Grace, this woman is your birth mother. She gave birth to you, but left you as a baby. Meanwhile, Samuel and Mary took you in and raised you. Now you must decide. Do you want to stay with them, or do you wish to know your birth mother?" Silence. Grace's little hands shook. She looked at Mary, then at Naomi. Tears rolled down Naomi's cheeks. I love you, Grace. I made a mistake, but I have always loved you. Mary squeezed Grace's hand. My love, no matter what decision you take, you will always be our daughter. Grace took a deep breath. Then she spoke. I choose. Grace's small hands trembled as she held onto Mary's fingers. Her heart pounded. Everyone was staring at her mother, the woman who had raised her, and the chief, waiting for an answer. Samuel knelt beside her. No matter what you choose, Grace, we love you. Tears welled in Grace's eyes. I love you too, Daddy, she whispered. Naomi took a step forward. My child, I gave birth to you. I never wanted to leave you, but I had no choice. Grace looked at the woman who claimed to be her mother. There was pain in Naomi's eyes, but also love. Could she trust her? She turned back to Mary. Mama, if she is my real mother, then what are you? Mary's heart broke, but she forced a smile. I am the one who raised you, my love. I held you when you cried, sang to you when you were afraid, and watched you take your first steps. Grace frowned. Then you are my real mother too. The chief cleared his throat. This child has lived with Mary and Dr. Samuel all her life. She has a home here, but Naomi has the right to know her daughter. Samuel's fists clenched. So, what do you want us to do? Give her away. The chief shook his head. No. But perhaps Grace can visit her birth mother, spend time with her, and learn the truth. Mary's breath caught in her throat. The thought of Grace leaving even for a short time filled her with fear. Naomi smiled. Just a little time with her. That's all I ask. Grace looked up at Mary, confused. Mama, do I have to go? Tears ran down Mary's face. She wanted to scream no, but deep inside, she knew the truth. She had to let Grace decide. The next morning, Grace stood at the door with a small bag packed. Her heart felt heavy. She didn't want to leave Mary and Samuel, but a part of her was curious about Naomi. Will you come with me, Mama? Grace asked, holding Mary's hand tightly. Mary shook her head, forcing a smile. No, my love, but I will be right here, waiting for you. Samuel placed a reassuring hand on Grace's shoulder. If anything happens, you call for us. You don't have to stay if you don't want to. Naomi held out her hand. Are you ready, my child? Grace hesitated, then slowly placed her small fingers in Naomi's hand. It felt different, not like Mary's soft, warm grip. It was unfamiliar. As they walked away, Mary turned to hide her tears. Come back to me, she whispered. When they got to Naomi's home, it was nothing like the warm house Grace had always known. It was small, dark, and quiet. There were no colorful curtains, no sweet smells of baked bread, no gentle laughter. Everything about the house looked so weird and scary. Where is your husband? Grace asked as she looked around. Naomi's face darkened. He left long ago. It's just me. Grace sat on a rough wooden chair, feeling small. She missed home already. That night, Naomi sat beside her. I know this is hard, my child, but I want you to know me. I want to be your mother again. Grace looked away and said, But you left me in the forest. Naomi's eyes filled with tears. I made a mistake, Grace, but I love you. Grace didn't know what to say. She only knew one thing. She wanted to go home. The night was cold. Grace lay on a thin mattress, staring at the ceiling. The house felt strange. It didn't have the soft scent of Mary's flowers or the warmth of Samuel's stories. She missed home. Naomi sat near the window, watching the moon. I know you miss them, she said softly. Grace hugged her knees. Why did you leave me? Naomi took a deep breath. I was young and afraid. I had no food, no home, and no one to help me. I thought you would have a better life without me." Grace frowned. "But you left me in the cold, all alone." Tears slipped down Naomi's cheeks. "I regret it every single day." Silence filled the room. Grace felt torn. This woman was her mother, but was she really family? The next day, Naomi took Grace to the market. People whispered as they passed. "That's the girl who was left in the forest," someone muttered. Grace lowered her head. She didn't like this place and only wants to go home because she missed Mary and Samuel so much. After buying some groceries from the market, they went back home and Naomi cooked a simple meal of porridge. She placed a bowl in front of Grace. "Eat, my child." Grace took a spoonful, but it tasted different and empty. She missed Mary's cooking. That night, as the rain poured outside, Grace made a decision. She would tell Naomi the truth. "I want to go home," she whispered. Naomi's face turned pale. "This is your home now, Grace." Grace shook her head. "No. Mary and Samuel are my parents. I love them." Naomi's hands trembled. "But I am your mother." Grace's heart pounded. She didn't know what to do. Would Naomi let her go? Or would she keep her here forever? Naomi's face darkened. She grabbed Grace's hands. "You don't understand. I lost you once. I won't lose you again." Grace's heart raced. "But I don't belong here," she whispered. Naomi's grip tightened. "I gave birth to you. You are mine." Tears welled in Grace's eyes. "But Mary and Dr. Samuel love me. They took care of me when you left me alone." Naomi stumbled back, her lips quivering. She sank onto the wooden chair, burying her face in her hands. I know I made a mistake, but I wanted to fix it. I thought if I brought you back, you'd love me." Grace wiped her tears. "Love isn't something you take. It's something you give." Naomi looked up, eyes filled with pain. "Then tell me, how do I make this right?" Grace hesitated. Could Naomi truly change? "I want to go home," she said softly. "Come with me. Meet my real family." Naomi's breath caught. She had imagined many things like running away with Grace, starting over. But facing the people who had raised her child, that was terrifying. "What if they hate me?" she whispered. Grace reached for her hand. "Then show them you've changed. Show them you love me enough to let me go." Naomi's body trembled. Deep inside, she knew Grace was right. But was she brave enough to face the past? The storm outside raged on, mirroring the battle in Naomi's heart. Would she do the right thing? Or would she keep Grace trapped in a love built on fear? Naomi sat in silence, staring at Grace. The words of a 6-year-old child echoed in her heart. "Show them you love me enough to let me go." Tears slid down Naomi's cheeks. "I don't deserve forgiveness," she whispered. Grace squeezed her hand. "But you can still do the right thing." Naomi swallowed hard. Could she face Samuel and Mary? Could she walk back into the life she had abandoned? Fear and shame clawed at her, but then she looked at Grace, the daughter she had almost lost forever. With a deep breath, Naomi stood. "Let's go home." Grace's face lit up. "Really?" Naomi nodded. "Yes. You belong with them. And maybe I can belong too." The storm had passed, leaving the world fresh and quiet. Naomi wrapped Grace in a warm shawl and led her outside. The sky was still dark, but a soft glow lined the horizon, hinting at sunrise. They walked in silence through the village, past empty streets and shuttered windows. Naomi's heart pounded as Samuel's house came into view. Would they welcome her? Would they slam the door in her face? Before she could knock, the door flew open. "Grace!" Mary cried, rushing forward. She pulled the girl into her arms, sobbing. My baby, you're safe.
Doctor.
Samuel stepped out, his eyes filled with relief and anger. His gaze locked onto Naomi. You brought her back, he said slowly. Naomi's voice trembled. I did, and I'm ready to face whatever comes next. The past had returned, but this time, Naomi wasn't running. She was ready to face her biggest test, earning the trust of the family she had once abandoned. Naomi stood at the doorstep, her heart pounding. Mary clutched Grace tightly, afraid to let go. Samuel crossed his arms, his face unreadable. You brought her back, he repeated, his voice edged with both gratitude and suspicion. Naomi nodded, her fingers trembling. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I made mistakes, but I never stopped loving her. Mary's lips quivered. Then why did you leave her? Tears welled up in Naomi's eyes. I was young. I was alone. I was scared. When I gave birth, I had nothing, no money, no home. I thought leaving her near the road would give her a better chance. But I was wrong. I have regretted it every day. Grace touched Naomi's hand. She told me she was sorry, Mama. Mary's heart ached. She had spent years loving Grace as her own, fearing this day. But looking into Naomi's tear-filled eyes, she saw something unexpected. After much silence, Samuel spoke at last. Naomi, what do you want? Naomi swallowed hard. I don't want to take her away. I just want to be in her life. If you let me. Silence hung between them. Then Mary stepped forward. You hurt her once. If you truly love her, you will have to prove it with your actions, not just words. Naomi nodded, understanding. I will. Grace beamed. So you can stay? Mary hesitated, then reached out, holding Naomi's hand. We can try. As the first rays of morning light touched the house, a new beginning unfolded, one of love, forgiveness, and second chances. Days turned into weeks, and Naomi slowly became part of Grace's life. At first, Mary remained cautious, watching every interaction, every word. But Grace's joy was undeniable. She loved having both Mary and Naomi in her life. Naomi proved her sincerity in small ways. She helped around the house, told Grace bedtime stories, and even assisted Mary with little chores. She never overstepped, never demanded more. She simply showed up every single day to show her support and love. One afternoon, as Mary folded baby clothes for her soon-to-arrive child, Naomi stepped into the room. Can I help? She asked softly. Mary hesitated, then nodded. The two women sat side by side, folding tiny onesies in silence. You love her, Naomi whispered. Mary looked up. She is my daughter. Naomi nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. And she will always be yours. I don't want to take her away. I want to be her mother too, in whatever way you allow. Mary studied Naomi's face, searching for deception, but found none. A lump formed in her throat. I was so afraid of losing her, she admitted. Naomi gave a sad smile. And I was afraid I had lost her forever. At that moment, something shifted between them, not as rivals, but as two mothers who loved the same child. Later that evening, as Grace sat between Mary and Naomi, holding both their hands, she giggled. Now I have two mommies. Samuel smiled from across the room, his heart full. Love had turned their pain into something beautiful. Days went by, and everything was going fine, until one sunny day, Samuel found a letter on their doorstep. It had no name, no sender, just a plain white envelope sealed tightly. He hesitated before opening it, a strange feeling creeping into his chest. As he unfolded the paper, his hands trembled. The words were written in bold, shaky letters. The truth about Grace is not what you think. Meet me at the old oak tree by midnight if you want to know everything. Samuel's heart pounded. He read the message again and again.
Who could have written this?
And what did they mean by the truth about Grace? Mary noticed his pale face. "What's wrong?" she asked, concern in her eyes. He handed her the letter. As she read it, her breath hitched. Who could have sent this? "I don't know," Samuel admitted, his voice low. "But I have to go." "No." Mary clutched his arm. "It could be dangerous." Samuel knew she was right, but something inside him pushed him forward. "If there's something we don't know about Grace, I need to find out." At exactly midnight, he arrived at the old oak tree, the place where they had first found Grace years ago. The wind whispered through the branches, and the night was eerily silent.
Then footsteps.
A shadow emerged from behind the tree, a cloaked figure, their face hidden. "You came," the stranger whispered. Samuel clenched his fists.
Who are you?
"What do you know about Grace?" The figure took a step closer. "The child you call Grace is in danger, and the truth might destroy everything you love." Samuel's blood ran cold.
Doctor.
Samuel's heart pounded as he faced the cloaked figure. The wind howled around them, sending chills down his spine. "In danger," he repeated. "What do you mean? Tell me everything." The figure hesitated before slowly pulling down the hood. The moonlight revealed a familiar face. It was the old woman from the marketplace, the one who always stared at Grace. Samuel gasped.
You.
The old woman nodded. "I've watched Grace from afar for years. I know the truth about her, and her real mother."
Doctor.
Samuel clenched his fists. "We know who her mother is. She abandoned her, and now she wants her back. But we won't let that happen." The old woman shook her head.
No, Samuel.
That woman is not her real mother." Samuel staggered back. "What?" "Grace was never her child to begin with," the old woman said, her voice trembling. "She stole Grace." The world seemed to tilt. Samuel couldn't believe what he was hearing. "What are you saying? Who is Grace's real family?" Tears welled in the old woman's eyes. "She comes from a powerful bloodline, Samuel. A family that has been searching for her since the day she was taken. If they find out where she is, they will come for her. And they will not ask nicely." Samuel felt his breath catch. His mind raced. If this was true, then everything he knew about Grace's past was a lie. "Who are these people?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The old woman glanced around as if afraid someone was watching. "I cannot say too much here. But listen to me, Grace is special. She was meant for something far greater than any of us can imagine. And if the wrong people find her first..." She paused, her eyes filled with sorrow. "She may never be safe again."